Hello, everybody. So today I just want to make a very quick video on the Fed and on my stance that I've given multiple times on the channel. And some people tell me, "Oh, I'm delusional if I think rates are going to go down." Many times in the comment section, I've received this comment saying me, rates are not going to go down; they're going to be higher for longer because it's the current narrative, and I am tired of this narrative. This has been the narrative for a year and a half? We know the Fed is bluffing. The Fed is not serious about keeping these rates this high for this long, for the very reason that if it were to do that, it would lead us into a massive deleveraging, way worse than the 1930s, way worse than the 1930s. This is very important to understand that the world is built on debt. Our money is debt. The only outcome, in my view, of the current situation is what's happening in Japan. If you follow what has happened in Japan, the currency of Japan, I believe the same thing is going to happen in the US, which means the GDP, the debt of the United States as a share of GDP will go past 200%, perhaps before 2030 if we keep going at this rate. All this is doing is creating a vicious cycle that is speeding up the inevitable. And the inevitable is that the US dollar will lose 99% of its value over the next 100 years. And we can be absolutely certain of that because the money is debt. The money is built on debt. We don't live in a hard money standard. We live in a soft money standard. Money is created, and more money needs to be created in order for GDP to grow. Governments around the world have been putting more and more money into the economy to try to get the GDP to grow. Debt increases 1 billion, we get 600 million in GDP. Why is that, right? Because a lot of the technology is just erasing these transactions that used to take place. Take an industry like, for example, the music industry. The music industry used to be a major industry. Today, it's reduced to very tiny transactions on Spotify or Apple Music. This is also true for the movie industry. Look at what's happening at cable. Cabling is going away. Transactions are slowly decreasing in size. The economy is deflating. We're going through deflation as a result of technology, and governments who are stuck in the 20th century keep believing they can grow GDP by devaluing the value of the US dollar over and over again. And I realize that this is somewhat of a controversial thing to say, but that's okay. That's why I named Beat the Denominator of the channel. The channel I named Beat the Denominator because my assumption is that, yes, we're going to inflate the money. We are going to inflate the amount of US dollars floating around by 15% each year going forward. And actually, the more we do this, the more we create hurt, the more we precipitate the inevitable. The inevitable. So I don't have much time to do a full video like I do usually with my numbers and spreadsheets and screenshots of different websites. So I'm just telling you what's on the top of my mind today. So what's happening is as follows. In my view, it is a mathematical impossibility for rates to remain this high without massive 1930s style collapses that nobody wants. This is not going to happen. The government is not going to want that, right? You see GM and Ford already starting to struggle. The government's already giving them money, right? $4 billion to upgrade the plants. Who knows how much they're going to get for the union strikes, right? We're not even willing to accept minor collapse, like Silicon Valley Bank that would have led to a few collapses here and there. Nothing like 1930s, nothing like what we need if we were to be serious about restoring of the value of the US dollar. Nothing like what we need, right? We refused. Like, we didn't accept to see the regional banking system collapse. Let me tell you one thing. The regional system collapsing is nothing compared to what we need for the US dollar to be inflating. It is nothing at all. It is nothing at all. And we did not want that. So the rates, in my humble view, will come down. I'm sorry, this is a rant style video. But anyways, if they will come down. It's like the market needs to look over a 10, 20, 30 year period. And not look over the next month or the next 6 months or the next year. Right? If these rates stay this high, or if even worse, as the Fed stated in the statement, they still want to increase the rates, more banks will fall. Now you tell me, we've kind of had the bailout program with the BTFP program. Well, by the way, this program has a cap, so it will need to be updated if more regional banks collapse. Now, if it is one of the bigger banks that runs into issue, then it won't be a bailout, it will be a bail-in. That means you'll have a haircut, just like they did in Cyprus, where amounts of money that are greater than, say, $400,000 likely in the US, we take something off the top to bail in the bank. So more banks to fall as the value of bonds, tend towards, not towards zero, but what is it, down 70, 80% for the riskier bonds? Like these bonds are going to keep falling. The more you raise interest rate, the more the value of bonds fall. And banks, insurance companies, any company that has most treasury assets, they're all in bonds, and bonds keep falling. So people keep investing in bonds, but the value of these bonds keep falling, and these bonds are used as collateral for new money creation. They're used as collateral for money on those accounts. So anyways, right? In my view, there's more banks to fall if they keep doing this, right? And maybe that's what we need. Maybe there will be a bank or two that falls, and then they will make a move. But banks are the least of our concern. This is a Goldman Sachs number, quick online search. So right now about 13%, and that's 2022 data. Keep in mind, this number is increasing because companies can't refinance their debt right now. Right now, about 13% of all firms listed in the United States, so these are public companies, big companies, over 13% of them are zombie companies. What is a zombie company? You don't have enough cash flow to service the debt. So the only way for you to keep surviving is to borrow ever more debt. 13%. Think about that, right? I personally believe that we will get to a point where not only interest rates are going to be zero, but we might have negative interest rates, like we had in Europe a few years back. These companies will have to refinance at higher rates. If you refinance at higher rates, that's assured bankruptcy. If you refinance at higher rates, so rates will have to come down, and they might need to come down suddenly, right? Just like they did on March 23rd, 2020. As you may remember, suddenly the rates were dropped. So anyways, but that's even the least of our problem. Now, the government can't go bankrupt, of course, but the government can go in a vicious cycle where it borrows ever more debt. And so, from what I read today, I think the government will likely have $2 trillion in new treasuries to issue to finance the deficit, and about $5 trillion to refinance old debt that was issued at 0%. So the government is going to have $7 trillion to pay on at a 5% coupon. Now, it's a tremendous amount of math. That's crazy. That's a crazy amount of math. We're going to pay hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in interest rate increases alone. It is healthier for the government to not have interest expense as its number one expense. That's why we need the 0% interest rate. The 0% interest rate is the only way to keep our system. And look at Japan. The situation we're in right now. Japan was in the situation in the early 1990s. The 1990. That's when Japan was in the situation of the U.S. right now. Right. So that was 30 years ago. Japan is still operating as a fine country, but we understand that, of course, the money's in trouble. The money's in trouble, and if we all get the money's in trouble, we all get it. Fine, the money's in trouble. Today we have alternatives. Today we have Bitcoin. Today, who doesn't use today their house as their savings account, right? It's a real thing. It's the whole reason why people buy big houses, right? You may not need a 4,000 square foot home. You may not need a 7-bedroom, 5-bath, but you buy it because it is a savings account. Even if it's implicit, even if it's not something we objectively know, people, families, companies subjectively, subconsciously understand that the money is going to zero, right? To quote Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's acolyte, the only thing you can be 100% certain is that the currency is going to zero over 100 years or 99% down. That's what we know. A Sears home, if you like Victorian homes, very, very, very nice homes, very ornate homes. A Victorian home from the late 1800s, do you know how much it used to cost? It used to cost between $700 and $1,000 in the late 1800s, between $700 and $1,000. Sears was actually selling pretty decent Victorian homes, which today would cost $500,000 in most cities where they are located. They used to sell those for $785 or something like that. That's what it used to cost for a Sears home. So the money is going to zero. We intuitively understand that the money is slowly coming down, and the Fed is bluffing because it wants to stun inflation. It wants to stun inflation. This also explains why a lot of middle-class households who understand this system subjectively, but they understand it, they still go ahead and buy a house with an 8% mortgage, knowing full well that in a few years they'll be able to refinance. How many people are taking that bet right now? A lot of people are taking this bet right now. Because this is where we are. And let me tell you one thing. Rates are going to keep going up. Rates are going to keep moving up if the Fed does not resume quantitative easing. If the Fed does not start buying treasuries from the US government, we have to ask ourselves who is going to buy $7 trillion in treasuries? Who's going to buy it? Russia's out. China's selling. A lot of emerging nations are now worried to buy U.S. treasuries because they know that these can be seized now. It's a new thing as of 2022. Now treasuries can be seized, so they don't want to buy treasuries anymore. The economy is not going to do well, so you could tell me, Social Security is going to buy some of these treasuries. Well, first of all, Social Security has a decreasing balance sheet, which means that they are taking money out of these treasuries to pay retirement benefits, number one. But then number two, with the unemployment state as it is likely headed, if the Fed continues to kill innovation, if the Fed continues to kill growth companies, if the Fed continues to even kill zombie companies, by the way, that's less Social Security payments. And Social Security, who exclusively buys treasuries, is going to buy less treasuries. So we don't have the demand there. Insurance companies, premiums are going up all over the place, but they're going up because there's been payouts going up all over the place. Who is going to buy those treasuries but the Fed? And the Fed will have to step in and buy these treasuries. They will have to engage in quantitative easing, because if they don't, what's going to happen at these auctions, right? Treasuries are auctions. What if the Fed doesn't step in? What if foreign nations do not step in? What if Social Security does not bid on the treasuries? Right? What are the rates going to be? What are the rates going to be on treasuries? Are we going to go to treasury, I don't know, 8, 9, 10% treasuries? Is that what we're going to have to see for people to actually bid on $7 trillion worth of treasuries? This is a tremendous amount of money. This is what, 20% of the S&P 500? That's a tremendous amount of money. QE will have to be resumed. That is my view. The Fed will have to step back in and be the buyer of last resort, because if the Fed does not step back in and does QE, the interest rate on those treasuries will be sky high, crazy, going up, and it will put the government into a vicious cycle, right? And this is my conclusion. I've already said this. If the Fed does not drop rates, which it will, and keep in mind, Powell will retire. We have an election year. I'm moving up, but we have an election year next year. Powell will retire. Inflation's coming down, right? The inflation numbers that they look at are coming down. The reason why we are likely so far in this rate hike cycle, that reason is because they have lagging indicators. But if you use things like trueflation, inflation is not the level the Fed thinks it is. So inflation's coming down, and the Fed will drop rates. But right now they are bluffing. They're making the market believe that they'll keep going. Even though, in my view, it is a mathematical impossibility. It is a mathematical impossibility. And if Powell, who is an unelected official, he's elected by the member banks, but he's not an elected official. He is nominated, right? He is nominated. It's very likely that the next president, or even if it's the same president, they will nominate a Fed chair that would change policy if Powell kept going, because of the massive deleveraging that is likely to happen as a result of this tightening. Because these 13% of US listed firms, and then imagine how much worse it is for private companies. For small businesses, right? They will have to file for bankruptcy because they can't refinance the debt. Imagine how many households will have to file for bankruptcy. Now, we're blessed in the US because in the US, we have fixed rate mortgages, and people learned from 2008. So it's kind of a blessing that there's a lot of fixed rate mortgages in the US, but it's not the case in the whole world. That's point number one. Then point number two, the US, though, has another issue, which is credit card debt, which is variable and which is going through the roof. So that's still going to impact credit cards. So you're still going to have some household bankruptcies, but less than if you've had variable mortgage rates. This is kind of a blessing that we don't. And of course, we'll still have household bankruptcies from company bankruptcies, because if there's company bankruptcies, people lose their jobs. If people lose their jobs, then you have household bankruptcies, and then it creates a domino effect, which is what Ray Dalio, calls the deleveraging. He thinks it's going to happen. He thinks the deleveraging is going to happen. I don't think governments will stand for it. I don't think we'll be okay with a deleveraging again. I don't think we'll be okay for the pain of, waiting in line 5 hours to get soup. This is not something that we will get the pain. I think most sensible governments, whether it's in central banks, whether it's the Fed or it's Europe, by the way, Europe is in a similar situation, they will choose the way of Japan. They will choose the way of a silent tax. That is the way of Japan. That's the way that they will choose. And, add 30 to 40 years to Japan, and then Japan will likely have a system that very much looks like Argentina. And people, of course, in Argentina today, they have a way, and that way is to own hard assets. That way, there's a way to understand and to live in this environment. You own there's a lot of savvy people in Argentina that own Bitcoin, that own U.S. stocks, that own hard assets, that do just fine. They do just fine in Argentina by changing the very notion and the very definition of what money is. right? If you change your definition of what money is, the fact that the money inflates is not that big of a deal because you have an understanding that the money is deflating, if that makes any sense. Inflation is just a tax. It's just a hidden tax. And right now, the choice that we have, the choice that government have, is either the choice of Japan, which is gradual monetary inflation, ever bigger, which I estimate to be at 15%, and it will go up, and it will go up. That's choice A. Or choice B is save the currency and have a massive deleveraging. Save the currency and have a massive deleveraging. That is the choice. And in a democracy, it just so happens that you're not going to have a massive deleveraging in a democracy. The U.S. is a republic, but this is not possible. This is not possible to happen. And if you look at 1929, if you study 1929, when they decided, of course, to have a deleveraging, right? The 1929 crash, then the deleveraging. Then who did we have, right? Who became president afterwards? Roosevelt. What did Roosevelt do? National parks, construction, everywhere in the U.S., Hoover Dam, reinvestment projects all over the place, Social Security, right? People voted against the deleveraging because, they didn't like to be poor. They didn't enjoy it. And in a democracy, if you don't want, 40-50% of your population to lose everything, if you don't want that, they will vote to not lose everything, which is they will vote the soft way to do it. And the soft way to do it is the Japanese way to do it. That's it. That's all I have to say. So this is why I am confident in what I say on this channel. That's why I name the channel Beat the Denominator. That's why I know that companies are much more valuable than the US dollar. Everything we see right now, in my view, is temporary. And the Fed is bluffing. The Fed is bluffing at 5%. And it may bluff for another 6 months. It may bluff for another year. But the longer it bluffs, the quicker it will have to drop interest rate. It will have to do a stark drop in interest rates. So anyways, not as prepared this video today. More of a rant style video. But, I hope you learned a thing or two. And this was not investment advice. This was just entertainment. I hope you were entertained. Thank you for watching, and have a great day. Have a wonderful day.